राधे राधे गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे 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 गोविंद गोविंद राधे।
Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami iti name. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatani Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gora Bhakta Jaya
Radha
Krishna Krishna Serbian summer camp. Glories to Shiva. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupadanayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandenam Shri Guru Shri Yukta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sarajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvabhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishnatam Namah Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavani Paschatadeshani Vanchakalpatarubhascha Kripasindhurayurvata Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tata Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you all very much for coming.
Hvala vam svima puno što ste došli.
Do we have the sound such that everyone can hear, both here and translation?
Da li je svima dobar zvuk da mogu čuti mene i prevodioca?
Okay. If you were probably coming at this time of day expecting to see Satchidananda Swami here.
Verovatno ste došli u ovo doba dana da vidite ovdje Satchidananda Swamija.
My apologies.
Izvinjavam se.
He will be manifesting himself later on this evening.
On je sad skriven, ali uskoro će se pojaviti, manifestirati.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. He's trying to make himself into a deity. That's what that.
Pokušava da se učini božanstvom.
Yeah. So I've been asked to start my discussion at this time, and yes, we hope that it will be interesting and illuminating for you.
Zamolili su me da moju diskusiju počnem u ovo vreme i nadam se da će biti interesantna i prosvetljujuća za vas.
The title of my discussion is The Vrindavan of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Naslov moje diskusije je Vrindavan Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Now, we've been hearing already in classes, lectures, seminars the last few days quite something about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his relation to Vrindavan.
Ovih prethodnih dana smo već nešto slušali o Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu i njegovom dolasku u Vrindavan.
So, we're going to hear some more.
I sad ćemo još nešto čuti o tome.
My approach will be a bit different from our other presenters.
Moj pristup će biti malo drugačiji od naših drugih prezentera.
And the reason for this is partly to do with the fact that I recently have been giving some courses with a particular kind of presentation, so some of it is leaking through into our camp context.
Razlog za to je što sam nedavno dao neke kurseve koje su na tu temu i to polako se pretvara u ono što ćemo izlagati na ovom kontekstu.
Recently I've given a seminar in Radhadesh at Bhaktivedanta College on the subject of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Nedavno sam davao seminar u Radhadešu na Bhaktivedanta College o Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
This is part of the Bhaktivedanta College regular course for third-year students.
To je redovni deo za redovne studente Bhaktivedanta College za treću godinu studija.
This is part of a 3-year course in theology and religious studies.
To je deo trigodišnjeg programa studija za teologiju i religijske studije.
Which is affiliated with and accredited by Chester University in the UK.
Koji je povezan i akreditovan sa univerzitetom Chester iz Engleske.
I mention this because I'm supposed to also a little bit advertise Bhaktivedanta College.
To spominjem zato ja trebam isto nešto malo reklamirati Bhaktivedanta College.
We would be very happy to see more students in our college.
Bili bi jako srećni da možemo vidjeti još studenata na tom koleđu.
It's quite a wonderful college, but it requires some knowledge of English.
To je jako divan koleđ, ali treba malo više znanja engleskog.
So if you're really enthusiastic and your English is not that strong, you can do a crash course in English.
Ako ste zaista entuzijastični, dakle, ali vam engleski nije tako jak, možete proći neki brzi kurs engleskog.
I also recently taught a course in Hong Kong at Chinese University of Hong Kong.
Nedavno sam isto dao kurs na univerzitetu Hong Kong, na kineskom univerzitetu Hong Kong.
And the title of the course was Indian Culture Through Biographies.
I naslov kursa je bio Indijska kultura kroz biografiju.
And one of the biographies that I had my students study was that of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
I jedna od biografija koju su moji studenti studirali je biografija Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
There is a field of study which is called life writing.
Postoji polje studija koji se naziva rating života. Procena života.
Right, life writing, the study of life writing.
What is it exactly from the last?
I will explain.
Objasnit ću šta je to.
Life writing includes biography.
Taj life rating uključuje
Writing.
pisanje. Writing. Pisanje.
Not lefting, writing. It includes biography, it includes autobiography.
To uključuje biografije, autobiografije.
It includes memoirs.
Memoare.
It includes diaries.
Dnevnike.
Many different formats people do life writing.
Mnogi formati kojima ljudi pišu o životu.
So I was introducing this topic, but I was bringing it together with Indian culture as a way of introducing students who had absolutely no idea about India.
Tako sam uveo taj kurs i da je povezao sam s indijskom kulturom, da bi upoznao, da bi se studenti koji nisu imali nikakvog kontakta sa kulturom Indije upoznali s tom temom.
And in Bhaktivedanta College, of course, we study, not of course, I explained, I think, I teach a course on Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this is the life writing of Krishnadas Kaviraj, how he writes about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
I kurs je bio na Chaitanya Charitamritu, naravno to Krishnadas Kaviraj, to je njegov životopis koji opisuje život Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Have any of you ever written a biography?
Da li je ikad neko od vas napisao neku biografiju?
No. Autobiography?
Autobiografiju?
Yes? Autobiography. You published?
Jesi se nikad objavio?
Not published. You're waiting to become famous.
Čekaš da postane slava.
No, that's nice. Actually, I encourage devotees to write autobiographical things.
To je fino, ja u stvari ohrabrujem bhakte da pišu autobiografske stvari.
So, in our discussion, we'll be mainly focusing on Chaitanya Charitamrita.
U našoj diskusiji ćemo se uglavnom usredsrediti na Chaitanya Charitamrita.
And my main focus is I want to look at how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu remembers Vrindavan and how he goes to Vrindavan and how before he goes to Vrindavan he tries to go to Vrindavan.
I moj glavni fokus će biti to je kako Chaitanya Mahaprabhu se sjeća Vrindavana, kako je otišao u Vrindavan i još kako pre nego što je otišao, kako se trudi da ode u Vrindavan.
I think it's interesting that Krishnadas Kaviraj spends a lot of time going into detail about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's attempts to go to Vrindavan.
Mislim da je veoma važno da se naglasi da Krishnadas Kaviraj odvaja puno prostora da bi opisao kako Chaitanya Mahaprabhu se trudi da ode u Vrindavan.
So we'll be reading passages from Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Čitat ćemo pasuse iz delova iz Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Maybe I should explain. I was asked, I guess all of us who are giving seminars, to keep to the topic of always in Vrindavan.
Možda treba malo da objasnim, zamolili su me kao što su i svi drugi bili ovdje koji su držali seminare, da se držim teme da je sve u Vrindavanu.
And one of the first things that occurred to me is that our connection to Vrindavan is specifically through Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
I jedna stvar koju sam se setio je da je naša veza sa Vrindavanom isključivo uglavnom preko Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Without whose blessings and without the blessings of whose followers, we have no connection. to Vrindavan. No understanding.
Bez čijeg blagoslova, njegovog i njegovih sledbenika, mi nemamo nikakve prave veze sa Vrindavanom i blagoslovom.
We heard yesterday, I think it was yesterday, yes, from Prahladananda Swami that you can go to Vrindavan but not be in Vrindavan.
Mislim da smo jučer čuli od Prahladananda Swamija da možete ići u Vrindavan, ali ne biti u Vrindavanu.
Yes. How many of you have been to Vrindavan?
Koliko od vas je bilo u Vrindavanu?
Quite many.
Dosta.
Those of you who have not been to Vrindavan, how many of you would like to go to Vrindavan?
Koji niste bili u Vrindavanu bi željeli ići?
How many of those who have already been to Vrindavan would like to go again?
Koliko od vas koji je bilo želite opet ići?
How many of you would like to go there and stay there?
Koliko od vas bi želeli ići i ostati tamo?
Some of you are, I don't know. Well, maybe not. Actually, I went and I was glad when I came back to Serbia.
U stvari bilo bi drago kad sam otišao i se vratio sam se u Srbiju.
Yeah. Anyway, we will be exploring, therefore, Vrindavan through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
I tako ćemo razgledati Vrindavan kroz Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
And this means reflecting a little bit on who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I think this is going to be no surprise for you. We understand who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He is none other than Radha and Krishna.
I naravno osvrnut ćemo se na to ko je u stvari Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Naravno to nije nikakvo iznenađenje za vas da je on direktno Radha i Krishna.
And so we can understand theologically, we think, who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? What's his actual identity?
I možemo teološki to shvatiti. Ko je Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Ko je njegov pravi identitet?
According to Krishnadas Kaviraj, he is Radha Krishna Nahe Anya. He is not different from Radha and Krishna.
Prema Krishnadas Kaviraju, on nije niko drugi nego Radha Krishna Nahe Anya, on je Radha i Krishna zajedno.
And where do we find Radha and Krishna?
A gde nalazimo Radhu i Krishnu?
In Vrindavan. So therefore, actually, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Radha and Krishna is always in Vrindavan.
I tako u stvari Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kao Radha i Krishna je uvijek u Vrindavanu.
And at the same time, he's always trying to get there.
I u isto vreme se uvijek trudi da stigne tamo.
And he's always feeling separation from Vrindavan.
I uvijek osjeća odvojenost od Vrindavana.
His actual visit to Vrindavan was quite short.
Njegov faktički posjeta njegova Vrindavanu je bila veoma kratka.
Something like 2 months he stayed there before his servant persuaded him to leave.
Ostao je nešto kao 2 mjeseca pre nego što je njegov sluga ga je ubedio da ode.
And so, yes, Mahaprabhu is always in Vrindavan and he's always feeling separation from Vrindavan. And in both senses, we remember him.
I Mahaprabhu je uvek u Vrindavanu i uvek se seća Vrindavanu u odvojenosti i u oba ta smisla mi ga se sećamo.
We know that at a very young age, Mahaprabhu takes sannyas.
Znamo da je veoma mladog uzrasta uzeo sannyas,
which is the traditional Indian Brahminical way of sort of officially checking out from society, from human society, saying, goodbye, I'm finished.
koji je tradicionalni indijski način da čovjek kaže s Bogom društvo ja odlazim.
And what does he want to do immediately after he takes sannyas?
I šta želi da uradi odmah nakon što je uzeo sannyas?
He wants to go to Vrindavan.
Želi da ide u Vrindavan.
He thinks he's going to Vrindavan when actually he's going to Advaitacharya's house.
želi da ide u Vrindavan, ali u stvari ide u kuću Advaita Acharya.
So that was his first attempt. But
To je bio njegov
attempt to
prvi
go to
pokušaj da ide u
Vrindavan.
Vrindavan.
But the broader point is he renounces the world in order to go to Vrindavan.
Ali poenta je da on se odriče sveta da bi išao u Vrindavan.
And in that respect, we also remember Mahaprabhu and we follow him, if not literally taking sannyas, we still follow him as he renounces the mundane world to go to Vrindavan.
I u tom smislu se mi sjećamo Mahaprabhua, ne bukvalno da mi uzimamo sannyas, nego ga se sjećamo kako se odriče sveta da bi išao u Vrindavan.
We're also going to, now and then, possibly, mention some historical context, some historical, even social, political context.
Tu i tamo ćemo najverovatnije pomenuti isto neke kontekste sociopolitičke, društvene i slične.
Srila Prabhupada once said of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that unlike all the other avatars of the Lord, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared within the memory of us all.
Srila Prabhupada je jednom rekao o Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, za razliku od svih drugih avatara, on se pojavio u okviru sećanja svih nas, koliko mi ga se možemo setiti.
Within the memory of us all? What does that mean?
Što to znači, da ga se svi možemo setiti?
I remember things going back, a few years within my lifespan.
Ja se sećam stvari nekoliko godina unazad u mom životu.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared more than 500 years ago.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu se pojavio pre više od 500 godina.
I don't remember anything from that time.
Žao mi je, ali ja se ne sećam ničeg iz tog vremena.
Maybe if I would get hypnotized.
Možda ako me neko hipnotizira.
But I think what Srila Prabhupada means by that is within cultural memory, we have a sense of history. Of course, it goes back more than 500 years, but we know a lot about our European history going back like that, 5 centuries or so.
Ali valjda ono što Srila Prabhupada želi to reći je da mi se sećamo istorijskog konteksta, mi sećamo se evropske istorije i da verovatno se možemo setiti ono što smo čuli o evropskoj istoriji recimo 500 godina unazad.
And so with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu we have actual dates we can relate to modern history.
I sa Chaitanya Mahaprabhom imamo faktičke datume, mi se možemo setiti te istorije.
So I don't know about you, but I find that kind of interesting.
Ne znam za vas, ali ja mislim da je to dosta interesantno.
On the one hand, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, eternal. His pastimes are eternal, without beginning, without end.
S jedne strane, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu je svevišnja božanska ličnost. Njegove zabave su bez početka i bez kraja.
And they also happened at a definite time in definite places with definite people that were meeting and speaking with him.
A u isto vreme se s druge strane odvijaju u tačno određeno vreme, na tačno određenim mjestima, sa tačno određenim ljudima koji se susreću s njim.
We're not being inconspicuous, are we?
Mi nije baš da nismo očigledni za njim.
Okay, so that's kind of an overview of what we want to do, and I think now we can start.
To je, čini mi se, jedan kratki pregled na šta ćemo tu da radimo i mislim da možemo početi.
Let's start with a little invocation of Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Počnemo s malim prizivom Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda.
Jaya Advaita Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Gaura Prema. Before actually reading some verses, I think we can mention a little bit of history in terms of dates.
Pre nego što počnemo sa stihovima, mislim da možemo da spomenemo malo istorije u smislu nekih datuma.
Let's start with the birth date, the appearance year of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Which year did he appear?
Da počnemo sa godinom i datumom kad se pojavio Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
According to the Western calendar.
Prema zapadnom kalendaru.
1496. You're close. 1486, yes. Anybody remember that time?
Was it 14th of February?
14th of February? Is that what they say? Yes, Gaur Purnima, right? It was Purnima. What is Purnima? Full moon. Full, as they say in India. Full. It was a full moon, but there was some problem.
Bio je pun mjesec, ali bio je jedan problem.
The problem was there was an eclipse.
Problem je bio da je bio pomračenje.
It was a problem in that eclipses generally are considered inauspicious.
Problem je u tome što se pomračenja uglavnom smatraju nepovoljnima.
And that's because it is understood that Rahu is coming before Chandra and obscuring the power of Chandra.
To se podrazumijeva da Rahu dolazi ispred Čandre, što je mjeseca, i da pomračuje njegovu moć.
In Indian culture there is a way to counteract everything.
U indijskoj kulturi postoji način da se sve suzbije, da se suprotstavi.
Isn't it? Astrologers know it.
Astrolozi znaju to.
There's always some adjustment.
Uvijek postoji neko prilagođenje.
In this case, the adjustment is to go to the Ganga.
U ovom slučaju prilagođenje se sastoji u tome da idete do Gange.
And dip yourself into the Ganga.
I pucnete se u Gangi.
And while you're dipping into the Ganga, chant the holy names.
I onda dok se puckate u Gangi, pevate svete imena.
For example,
na primjer,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we are told that this is exactly what was going on at the time of two things. One, the eclipse of the moon, and two, the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
I tako su nam rekli da su se ove dve stvari dešavale, jedna je pomračenje mjeseca, a druga pojava Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission was being announced in effect by the activities of the population of Nodia.
I tako u stvari pojava Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu je bila najavljena aktivnostima ljudi iz stanovništva Nadije.
Yes. All right. I'm going to fast forward. I'm not going to tell the whole life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Malo ću premotati na brzinu napred, neću o čitavom životu Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
But we come to the time when Mahaprabhu goes with some of his companions, some of his students apparently. They go on a, let's see, what would you call it? We used to have school outings
kad su učenici Šri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, mi to zovemo, išli s njim na školski izlet.
You had this in school? Sometimes you'd go to some place, some special place.
Imate to u školi, nekad odete na neko posebno mjesto.
So Nimai Pandit, as he was known at the time, took some of his students with him to a place in what's presently the state of Bihar, namely Gaya.
Nimai Pandit, kako je bio on poznat pod tim imenom u to vreme, uzeo neke svoje učenike i otišli su do mjesta u Biharu, poznato kao Gaya.
He had a specific purpose there, and that purpose was to observe the obsequies, the rituals for a ancestor, in this case his own father, who had died recently.
On je otišao tamo sa posebnim određenim ciljem, a to je da uradi neke rituale, neke obrede za preminule pretke, u njegovom slučaju konkretno za njegovog oca koji je nedavno bio preminuo.
So that was the plan.
To je bio plan.
But something else happened while he was there.
Ali se nešto drugo desilo dok je bio tamo.
And what was that something else? Something very special.
A šta je to što se desilo nešto drugo, nešto specijalno?
Not just one, but two things.
Ne samo jedno, nego dve stvari.
One is he had the darshan of the pada, the footprint of Lord Vishnu.
Jedno je da je imao darshan pade, odnosno stopala gospoda Višnu.
There's a temple in Gaya with a big stone, and in the stone is this big footprint impression. And they say this is the footprint of Lord Vishnu.
Ima jedan hram u Gaji gdje je imao jedan veliki kamen sa otiskom ogromnog stopala i kažu da je to otisak stopala gospoda Višnua.
We are told that when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had the darshan of this Vishnu pada, that something changed in him.
Kažu da je kad je gospodin Chaitanya imao darshan tog Višnu pada, stopala Višnua, nešto se promijenilo u njemu.
Something changed in his heart. He had been Nimai Pandit. He was a very proud scholar.
Nešto se promijenilo u njemu, on je bio Nimai Pandit, on je bio veoma ponosan učenjak.
He had good reason to be proud. He was extremely learned in all manner of Sanskrit grammar.
On je imao razloga da bude ponosan. On je bio ekstremno učen u svim aspektima sanskritske gramatike.
And in Mayapur, in Nadia, he had shown his learning to the residents of Nadia. So they were all very admiring of him.
I u Mayapuru, u Nadiji, on je pokazao svoju učenost stanovnicima Nadije, tako da smo se svi divili.
And so he had a reputation. The reputation was that of a scholar, but there was one gentleman who was a Vaishnava named Srivas Thakur, who was not happy that Chaitanya, that Nimai Pandit was so proud as a scholar.
Tako da to je bilo na neki način opravdano s njegove strane, ali postoje jedan gospodin, jedan gentleman, Vaishnava, poznat kao Srivas Thakur, koji nije bio baš presrećen što je Nimai Pandit tako ponosan.
He was an older gentleman.
On je bio stariji gospodin.
And he was a respected Vaishnava.
I bio je poštovani Vaishnava.
And he had some connection with the Mishra family.
I imao neke veze sa porodicom Mishra.
Jagannath Mishra, the father of Nimai Pandit, he had recently left the world, and here was this young boy he was a teenager at this time.
Jagannath Mishra, otac Nimai Pandita, je tek nedavno bio preminuo, napustio svijet. A tu je bio ovaj mladi Nimai Pandit koji je bio teenager.
And Srivas knew that his father, Jagannath Mishra, was such a nice, devoted Vaishnava.
A Srivas tako je znao da je Jagannath Mishra bio tako fini Vaishnava.
He was a little worried about how is his son going to develop.
Tako je bio malo zabrinut, kako će se njegov sin razvijati.
It would be a very sad thing if he would not himself become following the footsteps of his father.
Bilo bi veoma tužno ako on ne bi krenuo stopama svoga oca.
Just like parents today are anxious, will my son, will my daughter grow up to be a nice Vaishnava, Vaishnavi?
Kao danas roditelji koji su akte pitaju se da li će moj sin ili moja kćer postati dostojan Vaishnava ili Vaishnavi.
So Srivas would think like this: when is this young man who is so proud of his learning going to change and become a nice Vaishnava instead of a proud scholar?
I Srivas tako se pitao, kada će ovaj mladi učenjak kada će se promijeniti i kada će postati fini Vaishnava.
Well, the change happened in Gaya, and the year this happened would have been around, by the Western calendar, 1508 or 1509.
Ta promjena se dogodila u Gaji i po zapadnom kalendaru bi ta godina bila 1508 ili 9.
Actually, this means he was past 20 years old by now.
To bi značilo da je imao oko 20 godina.
He would have been married by now.
I da je bio oženjen do sad.
And he will also make a trip to East Bengal, what is now called Bangladesh.
Isto bi to značilo da je već bio otišao do istočnog Bengala, koji je danas Bangladeš.
But as I said, two things happened in Gaya. One, he had this very heart-changing darshan of the Vishnupada, and the other thing that happened was he met his spiritual master, Ishvara Puri.
Ali, kao što se već rekao, dve stvari su se desile u Gaji. Jedno je da je imao darshan tog Višnovog stopala, a drugo da je sreo svog duhovnog učitelja Ishvaru Purija.
Ishvara Puri was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri.
Ishvara Puri je bio učenik Madhavendra Purija.
And Madhavendra Puri is identified by Krishnadas Kaviraj as the seed of the tree of the Chaitanya tree.
A Krishnadas Kaviraj identifikuje Madhavendra Purija kao seme drveta Chaitanya, drveta Chaitanya.
And the reason for this is because it is Madhavendra Puri who expressed the feeling of separation, the viraha bhakti. Sometimes you hear the word vipralamba. There's another word, viraha. Viraha actually means separation. The mood of separation that Radha feels for Krishna. That was expressed originally by Madhavendra Puri.
A razlog za to je što je Madhavendra Puri bio taj prvi koji je izrazio odvojenost koju Radha ima za Krišnu. Čuli ste reč Vipralamba, ima još jedna reč Viraha, to isto znači odvojenost. Odvojenost koju Radha osjeća za Krišnu.
So Ishvara Puri is his disciple.
Znači Ishvara Puri je njegov učenik.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meets Ishvara Puri.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sreće Ishvara Puri.
Not for the first time, the second time.
Nije prvi nego drugi put.
But the second time, because of this change in heart that he has had, now he is ready to take shelter of his guru.
Ali pošto je ovaj drugi put se desila njegov promjena u njegovom srcu, sad je spreman da uzme utočište svog gurua.
Or maybe it was the other way around.
Ili možda je to obrnuto.
There are different versions. When he comes back to Nadia, Nadia means the greater area of Navadip. Mayapur is one part of Navadip, what we call Navadip, and Nadia is more or less the same as Navadip area.
Kad se vrati u Nadiju, Nadija je region koji u stvari je malo šire područje Navadipa, Mayapur je deo onoga što mi nazivamo Navadip, a Nadija je možda isto, ali možda malo šire.
When Mahaprabhu comes back to Nadia to resume his ordinary life, he cannot resume his ordinary life.
Kad se Mahaprabhu vrati da nastavi sa svojim uobičajenim životom, on to ne može da uradi.
For him, there is no longer any question of ordinary life.
Za njega običan život više ne dolazi u obzir.
Because now his life is completely overwhelmed. His consciousness is overwhelmed with thoughts of Krishna.
Jer sada je čitav njegov život preplavljen i njegova svest je preplavljena mislima o Krishnu.
And all he wants to do now is talk about Krishna.
I sve što sad želi da radi je da priča o Krishnu.
And when he is continuing his teaching, because he is a pandit, he cannot think of anything to say to his students except to explain their lessons in terms of Krishna and names of Krishna.
I sad ne može više ništa drugo da radi, jer on je pandit, on mora da predaje učenicima i ne može ni na nikakav drugi način da im objašnjava stvari nego kroz imena Krishna.
Many years later, one of his followers, Jiva Goswami, will write a Sanskrit grammar.
Mnogo godina kasnije jedan od njegovih sledbenika, Jiva Goswami, će napisati sanskritsku gramatiku,
which is called Harinam Amrita Vyakarana. Vyakarana means grammar.
Koje se zove Harinam Amrita Vyakarana. Vyakarana znači gramatika.
And Amrita means nectar.
Amrita znači nektar.
And Harinama means Harinama.
Harinama znači Harinama.
It's the grammar, the Sanskrit grammar, which is composed of the nectar names of Hari.
To je sanskritska gramatika koja se sastoji od nektarskih imena Harija.
And Jiva Goswami explains in his introduction that he's composing this because he feels sorry for students of Sanskrit grammar who have to study this very dry work of Panini called the Ashtadhyayi.
I Jiva Goswami kaže u svom uvodu tog dela da ga piše zato jer mu je žao tih studenta koji moraju učiti sanskrit kroz knjigu Paninija koja se zove Ashtadhyayi.
So, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the original Sanskrit grammarian speaking about Sanskrit grammar in terms of the names of Krishna.
Tako, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu je bio izvorni prvi gramatičar koji je gramatiku izrazio kroz imena Krishna.
Over the next year or so, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu becomes exactly that what Srivas Thakur was hoping.
Kroz sljedeću godinu ili tako nešto, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu postaje upravo ono što se Srivas Thakur najviše nadao.
Not only was he showing himself to be a very nice Vaishnava, but he was showing himself to be a leader of the Vaishnavas.
Ne samo što se pokazuje kao veoma dobar i fin Vaishnava, nego se pokazuje i kao lider, kao vođa Vaishnava.
So that even Advaita Acharya in Shantipur was seeing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as his master.
Tako da čak i Advaita Acharya u Shantipuru je počeo da vidio Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kao svog gospodara ili učitelja.
Advaita Acharya was also a very senior person.
Advaita Acharya isto bio veoma starija osoba.
Highly respected Brahman.
Veoma poštovani Brahman.
And he wanted nothing better than to submit himself to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's order.
I on nije želeo ništa drugo nego da se počini naređenjima Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
And as we know, Nityananda Prabhu came to Nadia at this time.
I kao što znamo, Nityananda Prabhu je u to vreme došao u Nadiju.
And Haridas Thakur, who was, in slang we would say, hanging around with, he was with Advaitacharya.
I Haridas Thakur, što bi mi rekli na šatrovački, koji se muvao naokolo tu, i on je bio sa Advaitacharya.
And so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would request them to go out and distribute the chanting of the holy name.
I naravno Chaitanya Mahaprabhu je od njih tražio da idu naokolo i da šire pevanje svetog imena.
Proti gore gore giya koro e bhikka bolo Krishna bhajo Krishna koro Krishna sikka. Please go from door to door. Proti gore gore giya. Go from door to door.
Idite od vrata do vrata.
And knock on the door if there's a door to knock on. Otherwise, just call.
Pokucajte na vrata, ako ima vrata da bi pokucali, inače samo pozovite.
And koro e bhikka, ask for these alms.
I koro e bhikka, potražite tu milostinju.
Because the renunciants, they're going door to door and they're asking for alms. Mataji, give little rice.
Ljudi u odvojenom redu života idu naokolo od kuće do kuće i uglavnom traže takvu milostinju. Mataji, dajte malo pirinča.
Ek roti tijie, So, no, they wouldn't have said tijie in Bengal. Anyway, Proti gare bolo Krishna, bhajo Krishna, koro Krishna, sikka. 3 things. Don't ask for just one, ask for 3 things.
Ne tražite samo jednu stvar, tražite 3.
What are they? You know. Bolo Krishna.
Sing and chant about Krishna.
Chant Hare Krishna.
Worship.
Yes, bhajo Krishna. Worship Krishna. Koro Krishna
Shikka.
Shiksha. Yes. Koro.
Do his instructions.
Yes, perform the instructions of Krishna. Follow Krishna's instructions. As Prabhupada would say, as Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita.
Kao što Šrila Prabhupada kaže, slijedite Krišnina uputstva kao što su Bhagavad Gita.
In case someone's not sure which instructions of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita.
Ako neko nije siguran koja uputstva Krišna slijedi, to su Bhagavad Gita.
So, Nityananda Prabhu, Haridas Thakur would do this, you know, the whole story, and then Nityananda Prabhu got a little too enthusiastic.
Znate čitavu priču, Nityananda Prabhu i Haridas Thakur su išli naokolo i Nityananda Prabhu je postao malo preentuzijastičan.
Big trouble, Jagai, Madai.
I onda ušli su u nevolju s Jagajem i Madajem.
We won't go into the details.
Nećemo ulaziti u detalje.
That's another story.
To je druga priča.
Which Chaitanya Swami can tell much better than I can.
Koju Chaitanya Swami može ispričati mnogo bolje nego ja.
And Mahaprabhu encourages everyone to, well, what happens is, initially they're having Harinam in private, especially in the house of Srivas Thakur.
I Mahaprabhu ohrabruje sve ljude. U stvari ono što se dešava da u početku se da njihov Harinam odvijao na privatnim mestima, naročito u kući Srivasa Thakura.
And it's by invitation only.
I to je samo po pozivu.
It's a closed party.
To je zatvorena zabava.
These are all-night parties.
To je zabava čitavu noć.
And everyone who's not invited, well, there are some people who become envious.
A ti koji nisu pozvani, pa ima neki ljudi koji postanu zavidni.
Why I'm not being invited?
Zašto mi nisu pozvani?
there were others who were not invited, but they would come during the day and visit Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very respectfully. They were very pious people and they would show their respects.
Bilo je i drugih koji nisu bili pozvani, ali bi došli tokom dana da posjete Chaitanya Mahaprabhu i odali bi svoje poštovanje.
And Mahaprabhu would bless them, he would encourage them, yes, please, you also chant Hare Krishna.
I Mahaprabhu bi ih blagoslovio i ohrabrio bi ih da i vi trebate pevati Hare Krishna.
Go home to your own home and together with your family members chant Hare Krishna.
Idite kući i zajedno sa članovima svoje porodice pevate Hare Krishna.
And those who would get such instructions would follow them, but their enthusiasm would increase, and gradually some of them would come outdoors and begin chanting outdoors.
I oni bi tako i uradili, otišli bi kući, ali njihov entuzijazam bi se veoma povećao, tako da bi neki od njih izašli izvan kuće i pevali na otvorenom.
And also in India, most people's houses, they're not that much closed anyway.
A i u ostalom u Indiji većina kuća pa i nisu baš tako zatvorene.
So inside, outside, it was kind of all merging together.
Tako da se to sve manje više stopilo jedno drugo unutra ili izvano.
And it's a hot, warm evening, so everyone is outdoors. So it was becoming more and more people doing this.
Tako da to je uveče toplo vreme, svi izađu van, tako da svi su počeli to da rade.
Well, that would have been fine, but Nadia was an area of, you might say, mixed population.
Pa to je bilo sve fino, ali Nadija je područje sa mešanim stanovništvom.
Yes, there were Vaishnavas, but there were others as well. There were tantrikas.
Da, bilo je Vaishnava, ali bilo je i drugih, recimo bilo je tantrika.
And there were many what we would call smarta brahmins.
I bilo isto mnogih koje bi mi nazvali smarta brahmane.
Smarta brahman just means a brahman who follows smriti.
Smarta brahman znači brahmana koji slijedi smriti.
Which means they're very much into following rules and regulations from scripture.
Što znači da su previše zagrani za sleđenje pravila i propisa iz spisa.
And they're not very much into understanding the purpose of following the scripture.
Nažalost nisu previše zagrani za pravo shvatanje šta je smisao spisa.
They're more into following the scriptures so that others will come to them for some brahminical services and give them some donations.
Više su zainteresirani u smislu za to da bi drugi došli kod njih zbog nekih brahmanskih savjeta ili aktivnosti, usluga i dali im donacije.
Or rather fees.
Ili honorara, što bi se moglo reći.
I wonder if we could make a humble request to the devotees further back.
Pitam se da li možemo ponizno zamoliti bakte u pozadini da budu malo tiši.
Shanti, Shanti. It's not already pizza time, is it?
Nije već vreme za pizzu, zar ne? I think nobody's hearing in the background.
Later is pizza, so what's all the excitement right now?
Maybe ice cream.
Ice cream, oh.
Maybe I can say something to the microphone so they can hear.
Yeah, well now they're getting quiet, it's okay.
Okay.
It's a Serbian mentality, Balkanitsky mentality.
Oh, it's human mentality. So, yes, so this was the beginnings of more trouble.
To je bio početak još nevolje.
Here we have some smarta Brahmins who think the best thing to do in life is follow rituals and get paid for them.
Ovdje imamo neke brahmane koji misle da je najveća stvar u životu slijediti neke rituale i biti plaćeni za to.
And over here we have some people who are appreciating that if I just chant Hare Krishna, and worship Krishna and follow his instructions, this is the best purpose of life.
A s druge strane ovdje ima ljude koji misle ako samo pevam i mantram Hare Krishna i sledim Krishna upustva, da je to ono najbolje što mogu da uradim u životu.
And it's a typical phenomenon of people who become newly, let's say, converted to a new faith, that they want to broadcast it loudly to everyone.
I tipičan fenomen je kad ljudi postanu novi vernici neke religije, da žele svoju ljubav proširiti svuda.
So whereas Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was kind of keeping things to himself, it was just for the insiders.
Dok je Chaitanya Mahaprabhu više voleo da zadrži stvari da budu malo privatnije, samo za njega i stroge njegove stepenike.
Here his perhaps slightly fanatical followers were going out and they were making a ruckus. They were making so much noise.
A ovdje su neki njegovi možda malo fanatični sledbenici izlazili napolje i pravili malo frke, recimo, malo glasnije sve to bilo.
One thing leads to another, and eventually we have a big confrontation in Nadia.
Jedna stvar vodi ka drugoj i na kraju imamo veliki sukob u Nadiji.
Because these ritualistic Brahmins decide to get some help from the local police.
Jer ti ritualistički brahmani na kraju su odlučili da potraže pomoć od policije.
To put a quick stop to these fanatics, these fanatical Hare Krishnas.
Da bi stali na kraj, da bi došli do kraja tih fanatičnih Hare Krishnjevaca.
There's an initial confrontation in which there's a warning.
Prvo je došao prvični sukob u kome je bilo jedno upozorenje.
If you continue with this chanting in the streets, then there's going to be bigger trouble.
Ako nastavite sa tim pevanjem na ulici, bit će većih nevolja.
So you better stop.
Bolje se zaustavite.
This is reported to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Onda je Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dobio izveštaj o tome.
When he hears about this, he says, this cannot be. Now we must assert ourselves.
I onda kad je to čuo, kaže, to ne može tako. Sad moramo izaći i odlučno se predstaviti.
Now in Bengal, because things are very sort of condensed, people live, when there's some bit of news, it can travel even faster than internet.
U Bengalu su stvari i ljudi da tamo žive dosta nabijeno i interesantno je to kad se desi nešto ovako, onda vesti putuju možda čak brže od interneta.
So when Mahaprabhu gave his order that everyone should come out now, we will make a mass protest, a civil disobedience protest.
I kad je Mahaprabhu pustio vest da svi sad nek izađu napolje, napravit ćemo jedan veliki protest građanske neposlušnosti.
Then immediately so many people, yes, let's go, let's face off those rascal police.
I onda su mnogi ljudi rekli, da, sad, ajde da izađemo i da se suočimo s tim nitkovima policajcima.
And those Brahmins with their big Brahmin threads, we'll show them.
I ti brahmane sa njihovim velikim brahmanskim špagama, mi ćemo im sad pokazati.
And those Muslims who have been making us be so quiet and humble all the time, we're going to show them.
I ti muslimani koji su nas terali da čitavo vreme budemo tako tihi i ponizni, sad ćemo im pokazati.
So they got torches.
I uzeli su baklje.
And they gathered in the evening.
And skupili se uveče.
Chaitanya Bhagavata says millions of people gathered.
Chaitanya Bhagavata kaže da su se milioni ljudi okupili.
Even if it was only 1,000.
Čak i ako je bilo samo 1000.
1,000 angry Bengalis you don't want to be around.
1000 ljutih Bengalaca, ne želite biti u njihovoj blizini.
Especially if it's nighttime and they all have torches.
Naročito ako je noć i ako svi imaju baklje.
So the order had come from the police chief in Bengal society at that time, known as the Kaji.
I naređenje je stiglo od vrhovnog policajca u Bengalu to vreme, poznat kao Kaji.
The order to not perform kirtan. So Mahaprabhu said, perform kirtan and let's go meet the Kaji.
Ali Mahaprabhu je naredio vršite kirtan i onda idemo kod kuće Kaže da se sretnemo s njim.
Well, the rest is history.
To je ostala već istorija.
Actually, there's different descriptions in Chaitanya Bhagavata. First, the people go on a small rampage and basically destroy the entire garden of the house of the Kaji.
U stvari, postoji opis u Chaitanya Charitamriti. Prvo ljudi dođu i praktički unište, rastore čitav vrt u kući Kažije.
And Vrindavan Das says that after they destroyed his garden,
Vrindavan Das kaže da nakon što su uništili njegov vrt,
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered his followers to burn down his house.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu naredio njegovim sledbenicima da mu zapale kuću.
Well, they didn't do that.
Pa nisu to radili.
Because at this point, although they were in a rather wild mood, they thought, no, this is too wild.
Jer u tom trenutku, iako su bili u malo divljem raspoloženju, pomislili su ovo je previše divlje.
And they persuaded Mahaprabhu, maybe we don't need to burn down his house.
Onda su ubedili Mahaprabhu, možda ipak ne treba da zapalimo kuću.
In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj says, at this point, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat down with the Kaji and had what I call a sort of interfaith dialogue.
Chaitanya Charitamrita kaže da onda je Chaitanya Mahaprabhu seo s Kazijem i onda su imali to što ja nazivam međuvjerskim dijalogom.
And before they had met, again according to Krishnadas, the Kaji had had a dream the night before, and in the dream, Lord Nrsingadev had appeared to him and given him a warning.
A pre toga, prethodne noći je Kaži imao san i u snu mu se pojavio gospod Nrsingadev koji je njemu dao upozorenje.
As the Kaji had given a warning to the residents of the Vaishnavas of Vrindavan, Nrsingadev gave his warning to the Kaji.
Kao što je Kaži dao svoje upozorenje stanovnicima Navije, onda je Nrsingadev dao svoje upozorenje, kaže:
If you touch my devotees,
ako takneš moje bakte,
then I am going to touch you.
Onda ću ja tebe taknuti.
And the way my touch is a little different from what you may be familiar with.
A da znaš da je moj dodir malo drugačiji od onog na što si ti navikao.
Here, I'll give you a little sample of this.
Da ću ti malo primjer.
And he scratched his nails across his skin. Was it his chest? Yes, his chest.
I onda je noktima ga je ogrebao široko preko prsa.
That's just a preview.
To je samo mali uvod.
So then the next evening when they had this interfaith dialogue, he confessed this to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He said, after they'd had actually a very civil discussion, then he said, actually, I'm quite happy to agree that kirtan go on because I had this experience.
I onda sljedeće večer je on to priznao, taj sam Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, i rekao, u stvari veoma sam srećan što mogu da kažem da se kirtan treba nastaviti jer sam imao to iskustvo.
He not only agreed to allow the kirtan to go on by the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu,
Ne samo što je pristao da sledbenici Chaitanya Mahaprabhu nastave s kirtanom,
we are told that he made a proclamation
kažu da je isto napravio objavu,
and that was that all of his descendants, apparently the office of Kaji was given by family descent. All of my descendants, I proclaim, will also respect the Sankirtan movement.
I pošto se čini da je ta titula Kažija, šefa policije, se prenosi nasledno, onda je svi svojim naslednicima rekao da i buduće generacije će poštovati, svaki moj naslednik će poštovati Sankirtan pokret.
Gaur Premanande. So this actually is a major victory. This is a kind of turning point for the story of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life.
I to je u stvari velika pobjeda, to je jedna velika preokretnica u životu Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
It's establishing that indeed the Sankirtana, the external purpose of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance, will catch on and it will spread.
To kaže da se izvanski cilj pojave Chaitanya Mahaprabhu da će postati prihvaćen i da će se proširiti.
So all of this is going on while Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is still actually known as Nimai Pandit, and he's still giving his classes on Sanskrit grammar.
Sve to se dobro odvija i dalje. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu još uvijek poznat kao Nimai Pandit i još uvijek nastavlja sa svojim časovima sanskritske gramatike.
But around this time he's in a sense losing his audience.
Ali u isto vrijeme sve više gubi svoju publiku.
His students are starting to question the sanity of their teacher.
Njegovi učenici počinju da sumnjaju u zdrav razum svog učitelja.
Because he can't seem to make a clear, systematic, grammatical explanation which they want without bringing Krishna into the story.
Jer čini se da nije sposoban da napravi sistematsku prezentaciju tog znanja na način koji bi oni htjeli, bez da ubace Krishnu u priču.
Even that wouldn't be so bad.
Čak ni to nije bilo tako loše.
But one time they hear him, he's gone, it seems like completely gone. Because now he's simply chanting Gopi, 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 Gopi.
Ali jednog dana su počeli misliti da je totalno odlepio, zato je počeo samo da peva Gopi, Gopi, Gopi.
Now, Bengali students can be very, what's the word? Disrespectful.
Sad, studenti koji su Bengalci mogu biti, kako bi se to moglo reći, puni nepoštovanja.
If they don't like something their teacher says, they will let him know it.
Ako ima nešto što im se ne sviđa toga što njihov učitelj kaže, onda ćemo dati do znanja.
This is even 500 years ago or more.
To je čak i pre 500 godina ili više.
I've heard that modern day professors in the universities in Bengal area, not only Bengal, they can actually be quite literally frightened of their students.
Čuo sam da danas profesori na fakultetima u oblasti Bengala mogu čak biti totalno prestravljeni od svojih studenta.
Because they think they know everything.
Pošto oni misle da znaju sve.
Yeah. And so here are these students and they're hearing from their teacher, Gopi, 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 and they think, no, now he's gone too far. What is wrong with you, teacher?
I onda evo ih studenti čuju svog učitelja Gopi, 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 oni misle, ne, šta ti je sad učitelju?
And when they start acting up against him, then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu realizes there's no more point.
I onda kad se oni pobune protiv njega, onda Chaitanya Mahaprabhu shvati ovo više nema smisla.
These people are not listening to what I have to say.
Ovi ljudi neće da slušaju šta ja govorim.
I'm trying to get them to surrender to Krishna, but they just show how proud they are of their grammar.
Ja samo želim da ih nekako inspiriram da se predaju Krišni, ali oni žele samo biti ponosni svojom gramatikom.
And not only that, they disrespect me, they can't even respect me as a teacher anymore.
I ne samo to, nego ne poštuju me i više ne mogu poštovati neka učitelja.
And this is not good for them.
I to nije dobro za njih.
Because sort of switching mode to being himself Krishna rather than just being a teacher. It's not good to disrespect Krishna. It's only going to react. There will be nasty reactions to that.
Zato jer i onda se prebacuje u drugo raspoloženje kao pošto je on sam Krishna. Nije dobro kad se ne poštuje Krishna, bit će gadnih reakcija.
This is when he decides, best thing for me to do is to change my ashram.
I onda je rešao, najbolja stvar što mogu sad da uradim je promijenim svoj ashram.
Usually when we hear devotees say, talk about changing ashram, it's from brahmachari to grihastha.
Obično kad čujete bhakte kako menjaju svoj ashram, onda je sa brahmachari idu na grihastu.
Nimai Panda was already a grihastha.
Nimai Pandit je već bio grihasta.
So he was changing ashram to sannyas.
I promenio svoj ashram u sannyas.
At the age of 24.
Na 24 godine uzrasta.
He had hardly been married. He had no children. He had a wife. His mother was a widow.
Jedva da je taman što je bio oženjen, što se oženio, nije imao dece, majka mu je bila udovica.
The proper business ordinarily for such a person as a teacher Brahmin was to continue what he was doing.
Prava stvar, pravilno po društvenom propisu, što bi osoba u njegovom položaju trebala da uradi, je da nastavi sa podučavanjem.
But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has a bigger plan.
Ali Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ima veći plan.
This is the year 1510.
Ovo je godina 1510.
Much had happened in the previous year.
Prethodne godine su se desilo puno stvari.
Between the time of returning from Gaya to the time of Mahaprabhu taking sannyas, so much had transpired.
Između perioda kad se Chaitanya Mahaprabhu vratio iz Gaje, do trenutka kad je uzeo sannyas, toliko puno stvari su se desile.
Well, as I mentioned before, immediately after receiving or accepting the vows of the sannyas order in a place called Katuya, or we say today Katwa.
I kao što sam spomenuo, kad je, nakon što je dao zavete sannyasa ashrama na mjestu koje se zvao Katulja, ili kako ga danas zovemo Katwa,
said, okay, goodbye Nadia, I'm off to Vrindavan.
I rekao, ok, s Bogom Nadia, idem ja za Vrindavan.
That's what he thought.
Tako je on mislio.
And so for 3 days, he and Nityananda Prabhu and 2 other devotees, Chandrasekhar Acharya was it? And I believe one other, were wandering about in an area of Bengal which is known as Radha Desh. Not Radha as in Radharani, but Radha Desh.
I sljedeća 3 dana on i još dvojice bhakta, Chandrasekhar Acharya i Swarup Damodar, Nityananda Prabhu and i još jedan bhakta su lutali predelom koji je poznat kao Radha Desh, ne kao Radha kao Radha Rani, nego Radha.
Radha with a dot under the D.
Sa tačkom ispod D.
Yes, Radha. It is the area which is said to be away from the Ganga.
Tako se zove područje za koje se kaže da je malo udaljenije od Gange.
Eventually they come to the Ganga.
Na kraju dolaze do Gange.
And Nityananda Prabhu persuades Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that this is the Yamuna.
I Nityananda Prabhu ubedi Chaitanya Mahaprabhu da je to Yamuna.
They've been going for 3 days, so maybe that's long enough to be already at the Yamuna.
Već su išli 3 dana, pa tako možda je to dovoljno vremena da se stigne do Yamune.
And 3 days or 3 months, as far as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was concerned, it was all the same.
3 dana ili 3 mjeseca što se tiče Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, tomu dođe sve isto.
Because he was anticipating coming to Vrindavan.
Jer on je žudno čekao da dođe u Vrindavan.
And he had given up officially his material life.
I zvanično se bio odrekao svog materijalnog života.
There was nothing for him to think about except going to Vrindavan.
Ništa nije imao na šta da misli nego da ide u Vrindavan.
But his friends and his followers and his family, they had other ideas.
Ali njegovi prijatelji, rođaci i sledbenici su imali druge ideje.
So that when Advaita Acharya shows up at the riverbank, the Ganga River, in a boat, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu looks and he starts to think, wait a minute, Advaita Acharya, he's from, where is he from? Shantipur. Shantipur, that's the opposite direction from Vrindavan.
I kad se Advaita Acharya pojavi u čamcu na reci na Gangi, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu počne misliti, čekaj malo, Advaita Acharya je iz Shantipura, a to je u suprotnom pravcu od Vrindavana.
Nityananda, you said that this is the Yamuna River.
Nityananda rekao se da je ovo reka Yamuna.
It is the Yamuna River.
Pa jeste Yamuna.
I am not lying.
Ne lažem.
Because on this bank of the Ganga,
jer na ovom bregu Gange,
because the Ganga and the Yamuna, they come together at Prayag.
The Ganga and Yamuna se susretnu.
Comes up from the southwest.
Susretnu u Prayagu. Yamuna dođe sa jugozapada.
I have to turn around to illustrate this. Okay, this is Ganga and this is Yamuna.
Mora se ovako okrenuti, ovo je gore Ganga, evo dođe Yamuna.
And then, so then it's Ganga and Yamuna becomes one river.
I onda oni postoji jedna reka.
But Nityananda Prabhu defends himself saying, no, you see, on this side of the Ganga, actually it is the Yamuna.
Ali Nityananda Prabhu se brani i kaže, ne, vidiš ono s ove strane Gange, to je u stvari Yamuna.
Yeah, right.
Ma da, kako ne.
Thanks a lot. We're actually in Shantipur, aren't we?
Baš ti hvala, u stvari smo u Shantipuru, zar ne?
Yes, actually that's where we are, sorry.
Dobro, izvini, to je u stvari gdje jesmo, da.
And you have an invitation, we have an invitation for lunch.
I imamo poziv za ručak.
And I, Nityananda Prabhu, am really glad about that because I'm tired of fasting for the last 3 days.
I ja, kaže Nityananda Prabhu, dosta mi je ovog posta 3 dana.
You may be so transcendental, you're going to Vrindavan, you don't think about it, about being hungry, but I'm starving.
Može ti biti tako transcendentalno, ti misliš samo da kako ideš u Vrindavan, ali ja umijem od gladi.
And besides, your mother is coming to see you. She wants to have a word with you.
I ne samo to, nego dolazi ti majka i želi malo da popriča s tobom.
You and your sannyas.
Ti i tvoj sannyas.
You didn't ask your mother, did you?
Nisi pitao majku, jesi li?
You didn't ask your wife, did you?
Nisi pitao na ženu, zar jesi?
So they go to the house of Advaita Acharya, and after some time Sachimata comes.
I odlaze u kuću Advaita Acharya i posle nekog vremena dolaze Sachimata.
And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who has now received the name Shri Krishna Chaitanya, that's his sannyas name.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, koji je sad već dobio ime Shri Krishna Chaitanya, to je njegovo sannyasa ime.
Technically, it's not a sannyas name, but that's another subject.
Tehnički nije baš sannyasa ime, ali to je druga tema.
It's not a traditional sannyas name.
Nije tradicionalno sannyasa ime.
His mother comes and she says, "What do you think you're doing?"
Do njegova majka dolazi i kaže, šta ti misliš šta radiš?
Šta radiš? And I don't think she said šta radiš. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu apologizes to his mother. Mom, I'm really sorry.
I Chaitanya Mahaprabhu se izvinjava svojoj majci. Mamo, zaista mi je žao.
I don't know what got into my head.
Ne znam šta mi je ušlo u glavu.
But what can I do?
Ali šta da radim?
It's too late now.
Sada je prekasno.
There's no going back on sannyas.
Ne možemo poništiti sannyas.
No, there's no going back, son.
Ne, sine, nema vraćanja.
Therefore, you're going to Jagannath Puri.
I zato ideš u Jagannath Puri.
And you're going to stay there.
I ostaćeš tamo.
Because that way I will receive news about you, regular news.
Jer tako ću moći dobijati redovne vesti o tebi.
Because there was regular pilgrimage traffic between Nadia and Jagannath Puri.
Jer u to vreme postojao redovni saobraćaj hodočasnika između Jagannath Purija i Nadije.
And so he proceeds to Puri.
I tako Mahaprabhu ide za Pure.
And I'm going to stop there with this narrative of life, and we'll pick it up later.
I ovdje ćemo prestati s ovim narativom i to ćemo nastaviti kasnije.
I want to read one or two verses, and time is flying by. And then maybe if anyone has some further discussion for a few minutes.
Pošto vreme malo leti, želim da pročitam par stihova i onda ćemo malo imati diskusiju.
In the Adi Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita, in chapter 3, Krishnadas Kaviraj shares with us Krishna's reflections on why he should appear as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
U Adi Lili, treće poglavlje, Krishnadas Kaviraj podeljuje sa nama Krišnina razmišljanja o tome zašto se treba pojaviti.
So, Krishna says in Bengali,
I Krishna kaže na Bengaliju,
Shakala jagate mare kore vidhi bhakti brajabhava paite nahi shakti. Everywhere in the world people worship me according to scriptural injunctions.
Svuda po svetu ljudi me obožavaju po pravilima spisa.
Very boring.
Jako dosadno.
No, he doesn't say that.
Ne kaže to.
But simply by following such regulative principles, one cannot attain the loving sentiments of the devotees of Brajavali.
Ali samo sljeđenjem takvih regulativnih principa ne može se dostići ljubavni osjećaj ili sentimenti ljudi iz Vrajabhumije.
This is again part of his reflection, so he's referring to devotees of him in this specific place referred to as Braja.
Ovo je deo njegovog razmišljenja i izlaganja. Ovdje se konkretno osvrće na bhakte koje su iz područja poznatog kao Braja.
And as I'm sure you know, Braja is the extended area. There's Vrindavana, and then, well, in present-day Braja, there's the town of Vrindavan, and then there's the larger area, which covers, they say, 160 square miles or kilometers. On the other hand, you're not supposed to measure the Hovidam, but it's a fairly large area.
I kao što znate, Vrađa je malo šire područje, postoji Vrindavan, postoji grad Vrindavan, i onda šire područje se zove Vrađa i to je oko 160 kvadratnih milja ili kilometara, iako ne bi trebali meriti sve to mesto, ali to je neka realna procena.
And then, a little later, this is verse 26, Krishna says,
Kasnije malo ovo je stih 26, Krishna kaže,
Yuga Dharma Pravartana Hoya Angsha Hoite Amamina Annenare Raja Premadite. My plenary portions can establish the principles of religion for each age.
Moji potpuni delovi su uspostavili religiju za svako doba.
No one but me, however, can bestow the kind of loving service performed by the residents of Vraja.
Međutim, niko osim mene ne može uspostaviti služenje s ljubavlju kao što rade ljudi u Vraži.
So the Lord is saying, my various forms, they can do the usual job of being avatars.
I ono što Gospod u stvari tu kaže je da moji drugi oblici, oni mogu da obavljaju te neke poslove da uobičajene.
Anybody can do that.
Svako može to.
Only I, personally, Krishna, can do this very special task.
Samo ja, Krishna, lično mogu da uradim taj specijalni zadatak.
And that is to give Vraja Prema.
A to je da dam Vraja Prema.
The word Prema, it can mean simply love.
Reč prema može značiti jednostavno ljubav.
So here it's being modified by the word Vraja, Vraja Prema. It's a specific kind of love.
Ovdje je to malo prilagođeno dodatnom rečju Vraja Prema. To znači to je taj specifični vid vrsta ljubavi.
Or we may say it's a special intensity of love.
Ili možemo i reći poseban intenzitet ljubavi.
And what Krishna is saying here is there's nothing that compares with this kind and this intensity of love.
I ono što Krishna u stvari kaže je da ništa se ne može uporediti sa tom vrstom i sa tim intenzitetom ljubavi.
Okay, one more verse briefly. And this is a Sanskrit verse.
Nakratko još jedan stih, ovo je sanskritski stih.
Verse 1 of chapter 4.
Stih 1 iz 4. poglavlja.
Krishnadas Kaviraj says.
Krishnadas Kaviraj kaže.
Krishnadas Kaviraj kaže. Shri Chaitanya Prasadena tat rupasya vinirnayam balopi kurute shastram drishtva vrajavilasina. By the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even a foolish child can fully describe the real nature of Lord Krishna.
Milošću Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, čak i budalasto dete može opisati prirodu Krishna.
Who is the enjoyer of the pastimes of Vraja?
Koji je uživatelj zabava u Vrađu.
He can describe this according to the vision of the revealed scriptures.
On to može opisati u skladu sa vizijom otkrivenom u razotkrivenim spisima.
Well, it turns out it's Krishnadas Kaviraj's book, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that more than anything, any other book for the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the scripture for this purpose.
I ispada da Chaitanya Charitamrita, konkretno Krishnadas Kaviraja, je kao nijedna druga knjiga, nijedan drugi spis specijalno namenjen za sledbenike Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Because this is the, you can say in a sense, the Gaudiya Vaishnava commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam.
Jer u jednom smislu to je Gaudiya Vaishnava komentar na Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yes. So, Valopi Kurute Shastram Drishtva Vrajavilasina. Drishtva means having seen. Through scripture, it becomes possible to describe the Vrajavilasa, or Vrajavilasin, the person who enjoys the pastimes of Vraja.
I Drištva, znači nakon što je video, može opisati Vrajavilasin, odnosno osobu koja uživa u zabavama Vrađa.
But how this is described is through the life of Sri Chaitanya.
Ali kako se to dešava je opisano kroz život Gospoda Chaitanya.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. He is describing his own life by performing his pastimes.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu je Krishna. On opisuje svoj život tako što izvodi svoje zabave.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So it's almost 7 o'clock, and I think there's our tea.
Skoro je 7 sati, mislim. No?
Yes.
We are not always 100% on time here in Serbia, so Krishna Kshetra Prabhu, just I have two questions. One is not so important, but just traditionally, the mother and wife have to give their permission for someone to take sannyas. Is this why this was a crucial meeting?
It's an interesting question. I don't know what it says in the, for example, Sannyas Upanishad. Wait, that was one question. There's another.
I wanted to ask you to put your scholarly brain to a question on what is a dream and what is a spurti.
Spurti.
Yes, when Lord Nrsimhadev appeared, it is said, or translated, it's like a dream, but it must have been more than a dream, because after a dream you don't have claws on the chest. So is that maybe a spurti, and what is a spurti? And please elucidate.
Oh, now you're going to embarrass me. Hare Krishna.
Or any academic
Something in English. This is something you have studied more than me.
Ovo je nešto što si ti proučavao više nego ja.
It is an interesting question. How is it, if it was a dream, that there was some, evidence of something more than just a dream?
Ovo je interesantno pitanje. Kao kad bi to bio san, ovo je dokaz da je nešto više od sna ipak.
Instead of giving a so-called academic answer, I would give a more simple-minded, answer that comes to my mind.
Umjesto da dajem neko akademsko objašnjenje, daću jednostavnije objašnjenje koga sam se sjetio.
And that is, even if it's a dream only,
A to je da je čak iako je samo san,
if the Lord is actually present, He can break through from the subtle plane to the gross plane, if He wants to, especially in Nrsimhadev.
Čak i ako je Gospod lično tu prisutan, on može probiti sa suptilnog nivoa na grubi, naročito ako se radi o Nrsimhadevu.
You mentioned this word spurti,
Pomenuti reč spurti,
and I understand this means a kind of vision, which is a special experience, which we take as somehow beyond the ordinary either waking state or dream state.
Pod time se podrazumeva stanje ili vizija za koju shvatamo da je iznad običnog budnog ili stanja ili stanja sna, šta god.
I don't know if it's a cognate to the English word spurt, which suggests a kind of sudden, something like explosion.
Ne znam da li je to srodno engleskoj reči spurt, koje aludira na neku vrstu eksplozije.
But I know in classical Sanskrit grammar, philosophy of grammar, there is discussion about what's called spota.
Ali znam da se u filozofiji klasične sanskritske gramatike postoji diskusija o tome, o reči sputa.
Spota is, there's a theory that meaning is grasped by a kind of explosion of understanding.
A to je teorija da sputa znači da se shvatanje bilo čega dešava preko neke vrste eksplozije razumevanja.
Because the question comes up, how do we understand a sentence?
Jer postavlja se pitanje kako da shvatimo rečenicu.
Here you have a word, and here you have another word, and here you have another word, and somehow you put them together and there's some meaning there. How does that actually work?
Jer ovdje imamo jednu reč, ovdje još jednu reč i onda stavite ih zajedno i sad pitanje je kako to uopšte ide?
That is very mysterious.
To je veoma tajanstveno.
And that's the kind of thing that classical Sanskrit grammarians debate about.
I to je neka stvar o kome debatiraju učenjaci klasične sanskritske gramatike.
So I don't know if spota and spurti are related.
Tako da još ne znam da li su sputa i spurti u nekoj vezi.
I suspect they are, but I could be wrong.
Počinjem da sumnjam da jesu, ali možda grešim.
But the bigger question is, how does this boundary get crossed, which we understand to exist between different, what seem to be levels of reality? We're all very familiar with the reality we're experiencing at the moment and the reality of a dream. These are quite distinct.
Postavlja se pitanje koja je razlika i kako se prelazi sa jednog na drugog nivoa stvarnosti. Svima nam je poznata ova obična stvarnost koja smo običajna i stvarnost jednog sna. I kako se prelazi između njih, to je interesantno.
Of course, there's another well-known example of this in Chaitanya Charitamrita with regard to Pundarika Vidyanidhi.
Tu ima još jedan slični primjer u vezi ovoga u Chaitanya Charitamriti, radi se o Pundarika Vidyanidhiju.
Who, because of his negative thoughts about the activities of the priests of the Jagannath temple, had a dream in which Lord Jagannath and Baladev appeared to him and scolded him.
Koji je, pošto je nešto kritikovao sveštenike iz hrama Jagannatha, da su se gospodin Jagannath i Baladev pojavili njemu u snu i oštro ga prekorili.
You rascal, who do you think you are in thinking badly about my priests?
Ti nitko je, ko ti misliš da si, ono što tako loše govoriš o mojim sveštenicima?
So what if they give me a new outfit which is not washed because it's full of starch for Odana Shasti? So what? We always do it like that.
Pa šta ako su mi dali novu odeću za Odana Shastri koja je bila puna štirka? Uvek to tako radimo.
And they slapped him on the cheek. Balaram from one side, Jagannath from the other side.
I udarili su mu šamare, Jagannath na jedan obraz, Balaram na drugi.
And then he woke up.
I onda se probudio.
That would wake anybody up.
To bi svako probudilo.
And when he woke up, his cheeks were all rosy red.
Kad se probudio, obrazi su mu bili crveni.
And maybe just a little bit purple.
I možda malo purpurni.
And Pundarika Vidyanidhi was in ecstasy. This is so wonderful. He had been scolded by the Lord.
Pundarika Vidyanidhi bio u ekstazi, u zanosu. Ovo je tako divno, prekorio me Gospod.
And he had proof of it.
I imao je dokaz za to.
He had proof that he had the special blessing of the Lord. See my red cheeks? Krishna and Balaram were slapping me.
Imao je dokaz. Vidite moje crvene obraze, Krishna i Balaram su mi šamarali.
How does that happen? The implication to me is that it's the all-powerful nature of the Lord. If he wants to, he can cross this boundary between the subtle level of dream and the gross level of the body.
Kako se to dešava? Ja tome tako različno, to je u vezi svemoći Gospoda, on može lako probiti sa suptilnog nivoa sna u grublji nivo tela.
And he does this in order to show, to remind devotees, I am present.
I to radi da bi podsjetio bhakte, ja sam prisutan.
Anybody here had your cheeks slapped by the Lord?
Da li je neko tu još dobio takvo iskustvo da Gospod išamara po obrazima?
Or your chest scratched?
Ili vam je ogrebao grudi?
someone wakes up with a tattoo that didn't happen the night before.
Neko se probudi sa tetovažom, čekaj, ovo nije bilo prethodne noći ovdje.
Any other thoughts?
Još neke misli?
Question about this appearance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu during this lunar eclipse.
Pitanje je u vezi Chaitanya Mahaprabhu kad je bio pomračenje.
To counteract this negative thing about eclipse, usually people chant the holy name according to scriptures, and you have said that they chant the holy name Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But when we look at the original Sanskrit text, it is also explained by Srila Prabhupada in the translation that they chanted Hare Krishna Mahamantra, but when we look at the original Bengali text,
it says Hari Hari.
Hari 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 Hari. Yes, about this is the question.
Pitanje u vezi ovoga, pošto si ti spomenuo da bi se suzbio loš efekat pomračenja, da su ljudi kada se gledaju Chaitanya Mahaprabhu na to pomračenja pevali Hare Krishna Mahamantru, ali u originalu, u Bengaliju, kaže se da su ljudi pevali Hare Hare, pa da bi nešto o tome možda rekli.
Yes, good question. There are different theories about this.
Postoje različite teorije o ovome.
One is that indeed they were just chanting Hari Hari.
A jedna je da su jednostavno pevali Hare Hare.
And that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to teach the whole mantra. Teach only part of the mantra. We'll give you the whole thing.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu došao da podučava čitavu mantru. Zašto samo deo mantre, da će ovom čitavu stvar?
Another is they were chanting the whole mantra.
A druga teorija je da su pevali čitavu mantru.
But not very much.
Ali ne baš puno.
If there was a lunar eclipse, then maybe they would chant Hare Krishna.
Ako je pomračenje mjeseca, onda su možda pevali Hare Krishna.
Or something else, different, everyone was chanting different things.
Ili nešto drugo, svako je mantra ili pevao nešto različite stvari.
There's a curious thing about the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Ima jedna interesantna stvar u vezi Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Of course, in many of Srila Prabhupada's purports, you'll find the whole Hare Krishna mantra, but you will not one time find the entire Hare Krishna mantra in the verses.
Naravno, u mnogim stihovima Srila Prabhupada u tumačenjima naći ćete čitavu Maha mantru, ali interesantno je da u nijednom stihu, baš u stihovima Chaitanya Charitamrita nikad nećete naći čitavu Hare Krishna mantru.
What's going on? This is the Hare Krishna movement.
Što se dešava u ovaj Hare Krishna pokret?
There are different theories.
I postoje različite teorije.
For one thing, the Hare Krishna mantra, you will be relieved to know the whole Hare Krishna mantra is there in Chaitanya Bhagavata.
Možda će vam olakšati da saznate da je čitava Hare Krishna mantra u Chaitanya Bhagavata.
At least once. Yeah. Only once. Yeah.
Samo jednom.
So why don't we find it in Chaitanya Charitamrita?
I zašto ne nalazimo u Chaitanya Charitamrita?
One theory is that in general one does not write down an entire mantra.
Jedna stvar je da običaj je da ljudi ne pišu čitavu mantru.
It's a kind of, you could say, a traditional etiquette that's reserved for the guru to give the mantra to the disciple.
A to je po pravilima neke etikecije, da to je rezervisano za gurua koji daje mantru svom učeniku.
In the Brahma Samhita, in the first 28 verses, it's describing how Lord Brahma receives a mantra and it gives the mantra, almost, but not quite. It gives the idea of what the mantra is, so anyone who knows the mantra knows, it's referring to that mantra.
U Brahma Samgiti u prvih 28 stihova opisano je kako Brahma prima jednu mantru, ali nije čitava mantra, nego je samo deo, tako da oni koji znaju tu mantru mogu prepoznati, radi se o toj mantri.
Another theory is everybody actually knew the Hare Krishna mantra.
Druga teorija je da u stvari svi su već znali Hare Krishna mantru.
So Krishnadas didn't need to elaborate on what was obvious to everyone.
Tako da Krishnadas nije morao da detaljno izlaže sve što je već svima bilo poznato.
And there are other theories.
I postoje i druge teorije.
But whatever the theories are, we chant Hare Krishna.
Ali kakve da su te teorije, mi pevamo Hare Krishna.
We follow our acharyas with faith. They're following Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Mi sledimo naše ačarije sa verom i oni slede Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
With apologies, I've been asked by my publishers to call your attention to these 3 books.
Sa izvinjenjem kažem da moji izdavači su me zamolili da vam obratim vašu pažnju na ove 3 knjige.
The first, some of you know from last year, Krishna Smarana, Devotees' Creative Monologues Elaborating Krishna's Pastimes.
Prvu knjigu već znate iz prošle godine, ovo je Krishna Smarana, bakte koje pišu monologi o Krišnim zabavama.
Which is a product of devotees, several of you are here. Some of it came out of a seminar that we did here 2 years ago.
Od knjige je proizvod nekih bakta koji su nekih išto i sad tu, iz seminara koje smo radili pred 2 godine.
Somehow the idea expanded and the next year devotees were enthusiastic to write pieces of Rama Smarana.
Na neki način ideja se proširila, ekspandirala i bakti su bili inspirirani da sljedeće godine napišu nešto o Rama Smarana.
And now we're calling this Devotional Meditation Series Part 2. So there might be a Part 3 coming eventually.
Nazivamo serija od devocijskoj meditaciji, drugi deo, a može izaći uskoro i treći deo.
As you see, this one got thicker than the first one.
Kao što vidite, ova druga je deblja od prve.
At this rate, the next one will be twice as thick as this.
Kako je krenulo, sljedeća može biti 2 puta deblja od ove.
If you want to practice your English,
ako želite da vežbate svoj engleski,
you might want to practice with these books.
Možda ćete želiti vežbati uz ove knjige.
And there's some really very nice meditations. The idea was that each of us would take what we have heard of Krishna Lila, of Rama Lila, and then try to deepen our picturing, our understanding of these pastimes by writing about them.
Ideja je bila da napišemo nešto kroz sopstvenu prizmu tih zabava Krišne Lila, Krišne i Rame.
And we have some artwork, especially in the Rama Smarana book, including some works by children.
Imamo i neka umetnička dela ovdje, neke slike, uključujući neke slike koje su djeca radila.
I personally am a fan of children's art.
Ja lično obožavam ove dela koje rade djeca.
Here you see
dečku umetnost.
Hanuman flying with the mountain. This was done by, I believe this was Narayana? Yeah, Narayana from Croatia.
Mislim da je ovo radio Narayana iz Hrvatske. Hanuman leti iznad planine.
11 years old, something.
Mislim da je 11 godina.
So these books are now available. We're especially appreciative of Nritya Kishori Mataji and many devotees of the Bosnian of the Sarajevo Yatra for producing these books.
Veoma cenim rad naročito Nritya Kishori Mataji i mnogih bhakti iz bosanske jatre koji su pomogli u proizvodnji ovih knjiga.
And then there's one other book which I'm especially grateful to Satchidananda Swami for writing a forward to.
Ima još jedna knjiga koju sam posebno zahvalan Satchidananda Swamiju koji je napisao predgovor.
This book is for madmen only.
Ova knjiga je samo za ludake.
Because you might find the English a little difficult.
Možda će za engleski biti malo težak ovdje.
This is called From All Angles of Vision, Selected Essays 1996 to 2004.
Ovo se knjiga se zove Sa svih uglova gledanja, eseji od 96. do 2004.
And we're very thankful to Dadi Baksha for organizing this book.
I veoma smo zahvalni Dadi Bakši koji je organizirao štampanje ove knjige.
Over so many years, so we finally
toliko godina.
Yeah, it's a collection of essays which I was required to write for my academic studies over this period of years.
To su eseji koje sam ja morao napisati za moje akademske studije sve ove godine.
Actually, not all of them were required. Some are things which I published in a journal, Journal of Vaishnava Studies, for example.
U stvari nisu baš svi te periode, nisam morao sve napisati, neke sam ja napisao za Journal of Vaishnava Studies.
The attempt is to try to expand our thinking about Krishna consciousness in ways that we can connect with other traditions in the world in which we find ourselves.
Ideja svega toga je da povežemo svoju viziju svjesnosti Krišne sa drugim tradicijama i vjerskim tradicijama u svetu u kome se nalazimo.
So it's meant to sort of push our thinking in different ways.
Dakle, to je na neki način namenjeno da pogura naše razmišljanje na različite načine.
Okay, I did my little blurb. Sorry for that. But these books are available around.
Ok, napravio sam svoje malo izlaganje, izvinite za to, ali ove knjige su dostupne.
Dadi Baksha, Nritya Kishori, like that. Tables, I don't know, there's somewhere. Right, I think we can end. Thank you so much. We'll continue this seminar tomorrow, if I remember, at 11:30 tomorrow morning.
Ako se dobro sjećam, ovaj seminar se nastavlja sutra u 11:30.
Something like that.
Tako nešto.
Let's see.
Vidjet ćemo.
Tomorrow is another day. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki
Jai.
Shri Vrindavan Dham ki
Jai.
Shri Radha Kunja Vihari ki
Jai.
Gaur Premanand.
Shri Krishna Kshetra Swami ki